Being that, we'll move on, but we certainly appreciate you coming and being very forthright with the comments, and we appreciate that very much.
Thanks for having me.
We'll now get to the third part of this, the B part, update from the Department of Energy. Pete Maggiore. Pete?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Secretary Flynn, members of the board. I'll promise to keep this brief for any number of reasons. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge and welcome Randy Erickson to the board and as ex officio. And Randy and I got to know each other. I think the first time we met was the night the breach drum was identified, and we spent some quality time at TA 63 together long into the evening with the laboratory director, and have continued to spend a lot of time together. And I have a lot of confidence in Randy. Look forward to working with Randy. I think you're going to be a real asset to the laboratory, to the CAB. I don't know if Michael Brandt is still here. Michael, I just want to give you a shout out as well. For those of you who don't know Michael Brandt, Michael and Randy and I have kind of formed this triad that meets weekly we meet every week for an hour at Starbucks. I won't tell you what time because it's small and we won't get a table if everybody shows up. We make a point of having a weekly tag-up meeting with an agenda to try and make sure that some of the communication issues the Secretary has referred to you that were not optimal in the past are optimized, and that everybody who should know what we're doing knows what we're doing. And I look forward to working with both Michael and Randy as we move through this recovery process. Real briefly, talk about the budget. I wish I had more that I could share. The continuing resolution goes through December 11th. I just came back from Washington, D.C. this morning, and it seems like whatever street corner you stand on and whoever you listen to, you can hear a different story about what might be expected. Conventional wisdom right now that I'm hearing is one of two options. One is a continuing resolution in the longer term. Another is an omnibus appropriation. I'm not smart enough to know the difference between the two, or what has the higher probability. The Senate mark is still at 225. The House mark is at 180 for the Lano cleanup. And hopefully we'll wake up on December 12th and have something under the early Christmas tree that will be more akin to the President's request and enable us to do a lot of the environmental cleanup work that I think many of you here on the board and the audience and Secretary Flynn certainly would like us to do. The fiscal year 16 budget numbers are still embargoed, and I can get into a lot of trouble even implying what those might be, so I apologize for that, but that's the status of the 16 budget. We talked a little bit about 15, what we're going to do. Every year, the Department of Energy, Los Alamos, goes down, meets with the Secretary and his staff to try and figure out what we're going to do, what work we're going to execute in the upcoming fiscal year. The fiscal year started October 1st, and we still haven't paid the Secretary and his staff a visit yet. We hope to pay that visit tomorrow. One of the reasons we've delayed it is quite candidly because of the budget, and quite candidly because of some of the things that the Secretary mentioned are coming out of the Lano cleanup budget that the Secretary indicated he would prefer not to see come out of that budget. But be that as it may, we're going to lay all the cards on the table. He'll know what we know, and hopefully we can negotiate a risk-based priority for work execution and do as much as we possibly can moving through FY'15. Secretary mentioned focusing on chromium. We share a very common vision there. We're also hoping to focus on stormwater protection monitoring, groundwater protection. We have some work we need to do with our federal EPA permit, which Secretary Flynn's department doesn't regulate directly, but it interfaces and integrates very closely with the work that the Environment Department does. On the true side of the equation, we obviously have scaled back a lot, but we have to get the nitrate salt waste processed, and that's going to be a very high priority for us to execute as well. The Secretary and others talked briefly about some of our self-disclosures, and I wanted to talk about that briefly as well. We sent correspondence to the Environment Department dated October 21st of this year where we reported additional instances of noncompliance under RCRA, under the hazardous waste permit. Randy and Michael and I and our staffs worked very, very hard on this. These were reported as potential violations applicable to generators under the New Mexico Hazardous Waste Act, which the Environment Department has been delegated authority to administer by US EPA. Three main areas where we fell short and wanted to review very, very briefly. The first was the failure to conduct an adequate hazardous waste determination and apply appropriate hazardous waste numbers. We failed to meet certain requirements for managing and placing waste that was incompatible. We failed to properly label unremediated nitrate salt-based waste during drums with the hazardous waste codes. And then there's sort of a domino effect, because when you use that kind of stuff wrong, a whole bunch of other stuff goes wrong afterwards, and that falls in the area of transportation, pre-transportation, packaging, relabeling, and things like that. So we kind of had three general areas that we self-disclosed, and this was self-disclosure that occurred in addition to an earlier self-disclosure we conducted in the year. It took a while for us to pull the string. RCRA is pretty complicated, as many of you know, and so it takes a while to work through all that. We think we've worked through it all. We think the Secretary's staff knows what we know now, and now the next step, obviously, is to try and put together a recovery plan. I want to talk a little bit about some work we're doing with relation to the Rio Grande and the Buckman Direct Diversion Board. Mr. Puglisi, I don't know if he's still here, but he had some questions about that. Well, I'll still share it to him. I'll consider him here in spirit. And I've known Alex for many years. We're in the process under the leadership of David Rhodes, who I think is still here in the back, to draft a new MOU. Our original Memorandum of Understanding with the Buckman Direct Diversion Board was for 5 years. It was pretty specific. What we found out after 5 years is, quite candidly, we didn't learn everything we hoped we would learn. We weren't able to collect all the data we wanted to collect. We weren't able to interpret all the data that we collected. It was no fault of our own. Sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. Catching the flows at the right time from the right canyons is more of a challenge than it might sound. So David and his staff is working very closely with the Buckman board, the board staff, the plant manager, to try and negotiate a new MOU so that we can continue to fulfill the commitment that we made to the board, that we made to Ryan and the governor about protecting surface water quality. It would continue operation of the early notification system, and the system would primarily be on Lannel property. We've had some challenges in the historic operation of the early notification system that gauges and samples stormwater as it leaves Lannel. When it's not on our property, we have some trouble sometimes collecting samples, maintaining it, and particularly when we get 1,000-year floods, even finding the equipment when it washes off our property. So we're working very diligently on that, and I wanted to recognize and appreciate the work that David's done on that. And then finally, there was a brief mention of, I think, Carlos, you talked about the transition of the legacy scope work to the Office of Environmental Management away from the National Nuclear Security Administration, and the transition plan was delivered to Secretary Moniz on Friday. He was briefed earlier this week, and there's a lot of work ongoing. Unfortunately, a lot of that work is procurement sensitive, and I cannot talk about it at this meeting. My hope is that we will be able to talk about it, and we will be able to be transparent absolutely as soon as we can. The Department of Energy looks very favorably upon the CAB as a venue for sharing information, and as soon as we are able to release information that addresses both the source selection aspects, the human capital aspects, I would personally welcome an opportunity to return and to share as much of that information as I can, ideally with representatives from headquarters, so you can hear it directly from the folks back in the Beltway. Several of y'all mentioned the Santa Fe, New Mexican article, and I don't want to dwell on that in any real sense. But what I want to do is just very briefly kind of summarize, and this will be the end of my presentation, some of the work that's ongoing. There's a technical assessment team that's ongoing that's looking at the analytical results. It's working with Randy, with Terry Wallace, who you know, looking at all the analytical work the laboratory has done, doing additional analytical work to bring the best science and scientists that we can bear to try and figure out what happened to answer some of the questions that Secretary Flynn and many others have raised. The Accident Investigation Board work is ongoing. Both of those projects, my understanding, are waiting for Project REACH, which is a very important project, which is going to give us some additional visibility throughout Panel 7. Those are kind of all highly integrated. LANL has conducted an internal review and an external causal analysis. I'm not certain of the status. I don't want to speak for the laboratory. Tremendous amount of work going there. Office of Inspector General has issued a report already. That final report is out. The Office of Enforcement sent a letter to us on November 14th, notifying us that they'll be doing an investigation. And then finally, Secretary Flynn, under his leadership, has indicated, working with Deputy Undersecretary Klaus, the intent to do an independent review. And we fully support that, look forward to working with that. So when you put all that together, there's a lot of eyeballs on what we're doing, and there's going to be a lot of information, there's going to be a lot of reports. I'm not smart enough to know what those are going to conclude and how those are all going to build into corrective action, but I will commit on behalf of NNSA that we'll keep this board as involved as possible. We'll accept any invitations to return, to present, and to the extent that the information is not privileged, we will be as transparent as possible. So with that, I'd like to conclude, try and get you guys back on track, and thank you again for the opportunity to be